The windshield wipers struggled against the relentless November rain, squeaking rhythmically as I drove home from my late shift at Memorial Hospital. 3 years into my nursing career, I had finally adjusted to the demanding schedule, though David still complained about my irregular hours. Tonight, after 12 exhausting hours in the pediatric ward, all I wanted was a hot shower and the comfort of my husband's arms. I smiled, thinking of the text David had sent earlier. Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you. His investment banking job often kept him at the office until midnight, especially during quarter end. We were like ships passing in the night lately. Me with my rotating shifts, him with his late hours. But we'd promised to make time for our anniversary next week. 5 years deserved a proper celebration. The rain intensified as I turned onto Maple Street, just a few blocks from home. I slowed down, squinting through the downpour, when something caught my eye that made me tap the brakes involuntarily. A silver Audi A6 with a small dent on the rear bumper, identical to David's car, was parked in front of a familiar brick townhouse. Rachel's house. Rachel Stevens, my best friend since college, maid of honor at our wedding, godmother to the children we planned to have someday. Rachel, who had helped me pick out the surprise watch I'd bought David for our anniversary. Rachel, who had been uncharacteristically distant these past few months, always too busy to meet for our traditional Sunday brunches. I pulled over, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. There had to be a logical explanation. David occasionally met clients near their homes, and Rachel had mentioned hiring a financial advisor. Perhaps they were discussing investments. At 11:30 p.m. in her home, while he told me he was working late. The rain drummed on the roof of my car as I sat paralyzed with indecision. Should I drive home and pretend I hadn't seen anything? Should I call him? Should I walk up to Rachel's door and confront them? Before I could decide, the porch light illuminated, casting a golden glow through the rain. The front door opened, and 2 silhouettes appeared in the doorway. One unmistakably my husband's tall frame, the other Rachel's petite figure. They embraced, lingering in a way that friends never would, before David dashed to his car through the rain. And just like that, on a rainy Tuesday night, my world imploded. I don't remember driving home. Somehow, I arrived in our driveway 15 minutes before David, giving me just enough time to shower off the hospital smell and slip into bed. I lay there in the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs, listening to the familiar sounds of his arrival. The garage door rumbling open, his keys landing in the ceramic bowl by the door, his footsteps on the stairs. "Emma?" he whispered, checking if I was awake. I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. I couldn't face him yet, not when my thoughts were a hurricane of questions and accusations. I needed time to process what I'd seen, to decide how to approach the betrayal that was now sitting in our bedroom, quietly removing his tie and watch. The mattress dipped as David slid under the covers. He smelled of unfamiliar perfume poorly masked by the car's air freshener. How had I missed these signs before? Had I been so consumed by my own exhaustion that I'd failed to notice my husband falling in love with my best friend? Sleep evaded me that night, but I maintained my charade until David's alarm blared at 6:30 a.m. He kissed my forehead before heading to the shower, a gesture that now felt like another betrayal rather than the affection it had once represented. "Late night?" I asked when he emerged, my voice steadier than I felt. "Yeah, the Wilson portfolio is a mess," he replied, not quite meeting my eyes as he selected a blue tie from his closet. I didn't get home until almost midnight. The lie slipped from his lips so effortlessly that I wondered how many others had preceded it. Had our entire marriage been built on deceptions I was too trusting to notice? "I'm meeting Rachel for coffee this afternoon," I said, watching his reflection in the mirror. "She finally has time in her schedule." His hands faltered slightly as he adjusted his tie. "That's nice. Tell her I said hi." "I will," I promised, a bitter taste filling my mouth. "Anything specific you'd like me to pass along?" David turned, his expression quizzical but not alarmed. "No, just the usual." "Ah, the usual." What exactly was the usual between my husband and best friend these days? After David left for work, I called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 2 years. I couldn't focus on caring for others when my own life was unraveling. Instead, I sat at our kitchen island, scrolling through David's and Rachel's social media accounts, as if digital breadcrumbs might explain when and how this had happened. Nothing seemed obvious at first glance. No suspicious comments, no telling photos. But as I scrutinized more closely, patterns emerged. Rachel liking every one of David's posts within minutes. David commenting on her photos with inside jokes I didn't understand. And the timestamps. Rachel posting from a wine bar on evenings when David was supposedly working late. At 11 a.m., I texted Rachel, "Free for coffee at Bluebird Cafe at 2, need to talk." Her response came quickly. "Absolutely? Everything okay?" The concern in her message made my stomach turn. How could she pretend to care about my well-being while betraying me so profoundly? I spent the next hours rehearsing what I would say, vacillating between icy confrontation and tearful questioning. By the time I parked outside the cafe, our usual spot, where Rachel and I had spent countless hours discussing everything from career frustrations to marriage concerns, I had settled on a direct approach. No accusations, just questions. I would give her the opportunity to confess, to explain herself before revealing what I knew. Through the cafe window, I could see Rachel already seated at our favorite corner table, checking her watch nervously. She looked immaculate as always, her dark hair falling in perfect waves, her makeup flawless, wearing the emerald blouse I had complimented last month. My best friend, my husband's lover, the woman who had shattered my trust with both hands. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door, the cheerful bell announcing my arrival like the opening bell of a boxing match neither of us was prepared for. "Emma!" Rachel's face lit up with a smile that now seemed grotesque in its falseness. She stood to embrace me, and I forced myself to return the hug, my body rigid with restrained anger. "I ordered your usual," she said, gesturing to the hazelnut latte waiting for me. "You sounded stressed in your text." "Work issues?" I settled into my chair, studying her face, the face I had trusted implicitly for over a decade. "Not work," I replied evenly. "Marriage issues, actually." A flicker of something, alarm, guilt, crossed her features before she composed herself. "Oh, is everything okay with you and David?" The concern in her voice nearly broke my resolve. How could she sit across from me, pretending to be the supportive friend while sleeping with my husband? "That's an interesting question," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug without drinking. "I was hoping you might help me understand something." Rachel tilted her head, the picture of friendly confusion. "Of course, anything. Why was my husband at your house until nearly midnight last night when he told me he was working late?" The color drained from Rachel's face so rapidly I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no sound emerged. Her hand, reaching for her cup, trembled visibly. "Emma," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think." A hollow laugh escaped me. "Isn't that what people always say when it's exactly what the other person thinks?" "No, really." Rachel leaned forward urgently. "Yes, David was at my house, but it wasn't, we weren't what, Rachel? Weren't sleeping together? Weren't betraying me? Weren't destroying my marriage and our friendship simultaneously?" My voice remained low but intense, aware of the other cafe patrons who were beginning to glance our way. "We're planning your anniversary surprise," Rachel blurted out, her eyes filling with tears. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Of all the excuses I had anticipated, this was not among them. "Your anniversary gift," she continued hurriedly. "David's been working with me to plan a surprise vow renewal ceremony. That's why he's been coming over, to coordinate details without you knowing. The late nights at work have been him taking extra clients to pay for it all." A vow renewal? We had discussed doing something special for our 5th anniversary, but nothing so elaborate. It seemed both touching and excessive, and, more importantly, completely implausible as an explanation for what I had witnessed. "You expect me to believe that the intimate embrace I saw last night was about party planning?" I asked incredulously. Rachel's expression shifted from desperate to confused. "Embrace? Emma, David and I have never..." She stopped abruptly, realization dawning. "Last night in the doorway? That wasn't an intimate embrace. David was showing me the watch you bought him." "The watch isn't wrapped yet," I countered. "It's hidden in my locker at the hospital." "Not that watch," Rachel said. "The vintage Omega he inherited from his grandfather. The one he's having restored for your ceremony. He brought it over to show me because the restoration was finally completed." My certainty wavered slightly. David's grandfather's watch had been broken for years, its sentimental value too great to risk with just any repair shop. David had mentioned finding a specialist eventually, but I didn't know he had actually done it. "Why would he need to show you a watch at 11:30 at night?" I pressed, still suspicious. "Because that's when he picked it up from the specialist in Oakwood," Rachel explained. "He was so excited he wanted to show someone. He came by on his way home." It sounded plausible, but something still felt off. The perfume, the secretive texts, the way they had both been avoiding me lately. "If you're planning this surprise together, let me see your text conversations," I challenged, extending my hand for her phone. Rachel hesitated, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Emma, if there's nothing to hide, there's no reason not to show me," I insisted, my suspicion resurging. With visible reluctance, Rachel unlocked her phone and handed it to me. I opened her messages with David, bracing myself for confirmation of my worst fears. What I found instead was page after page of logistical discussions about venues, caterers, guest lists, and budget concerns, photos of flower arrangements and color schemes, arguments about music selections, the most recent messages from last night. David: "Just picked up the watch. It looks amazing. Can I stop by to show you? I'm too excited to wait." Rachel: "It's late, but sure. I'm still up working on the centerpiece prototypes anyway." David: "Thanks. Be there in 15. I scrolled up, looking for anything suspicious, any hidden meaning or deleted conversations, but found only more innocent planning details stretching back nearly 3 months. The realization that I might have catastrophically misinterpreted the situation began to dawn, bringing with it a nauseating mix of relief and shame. "There are over 1,000 messages here," I said quietly, still scrolling through the detailed plans for what appeared to be an elaborate surprise ceremony at the botanical gardens where David and I had gotten engaged. "We've been planning for months," Rachel confirmed, her expression softening from defensive to sympathetic. "David wanted everything to be perfect. He's been taking extra clients and working late to afford it all without dipping into your joint savings." The weight of my accusation hung between us. I had been ready to destroy both my marriage and my closest friendship, based on a few circumstantial observations and my own insecurities. "The perfume," I murmured, almost to myself. "He came home smelling like perfume." Rachel's brow furrowed momentarily before understanding dawned. "That would be my new Joe Malone. I just started wearing it last week." She pulled up her sleeve slightly and extended her wrist. "Here, smell." I leaned forward reluctantly and caught the distinctive floral scent I had detected on David last night. It wasn't the seductive perfume of an affair I had imagined, but the casual fragrance that might transfer during a brief, friendly hug. "I feel horrible," I admitted, handing her phone back. I jumped to the worst possible conclusion. Rachel reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "It's not completely irrational, Em. We have been acting secretive, and given how many marriages end because of affairs, it's not crazy that your mind went there. But it is crazy to immediately assume my husband and best friend would betray me like that," I insisted, guilt washing over me. "I should have trusted both of you more." Rachel sighed, stirring her now cold coffee. "Trust is complicated, and you've been under so much stress with your schedule at the hospital. Sleep deprivation doesn't exactly enhance rational thinking." While her forgiveness was a relief, it didn't erase my shame or the larger question looming over me. What did my immediate leap to infidelity say about my marriage? About my own insecurities? "Please don't tell David about this," I pleaded. "He'd be devastated to know I suspected him of cheating. With you, of all people." Rachel's expression turned thoughtful. "I won't volunteer the information, but Emma, maybe you should tell him yourself. Not necessarily about suspecting us specifically, but about your fears. If you're having these kinds of doubts, there might be other issues in your marriage that need addressing." Her suggestion made me uncomfortable, but I recognized the wisdom in it. My suspicion hadn't materialized from nowhere. There had been a growing distance between David and me over the past year, separate schedules, fewer meaningful conversations, intimacy that had become routine rather than passionate. The affair suspicion may have been wrong, but the sense that something was missing in our marriage wasn't entirely unfounded. I wouldn't even know how to start that conversation, I admitted. "Start with appreciation," Rachel suggested. "Acknowledge the effort he's putting into your anniversary. Then maybe open up about how you've been feeling disconnected lately." As a nurse, I was trained to have difficult conversations about life-altering diagnoses and end-of-life care. Yet the thought of initiating an honest discussion about the state of my marriage terrified me more than any professional challenge I'd faced. "What if it makes things worse?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if I bring up these issues and he realizes he's not happy either?" Rachel's expression softened. "Then you'll face that together too. But Emma, problems don't disappear because we avoid talking about them. They just go underground and grow roots." She was right, of course. My suspicion of an affair was a symptom, not the disease itself. Something was missing in my marriage. Not fidelity, thankfully, but perhaps the communication and connection that had once made us strong. I'll talk to him, I promised, both to Rachel and myself. After the anniversary surprise. I don't want to ruin what he's worked so hard to plan. Rachel nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by my timeline. Just don't wait too long. These things have a way of festering. As we prepared to leave the cafe, a new text message illuminated Rachel's phone screen. David's name appeared above a message only partially visible. Emma called in sick today. Do you think she says... My stomach dropped as Rachel quickly flipped her phone over, but the damage was done. The partial message reignited all my earlier suspicions in an instant. What does the rest of that message say? I demanded, my voice sharper than intended. Rachel's expression fell as she realized what I'd seen. With obvious reluctance, she turned her phone over and showed me the complete message. Emma called in sick today. Do you think she suspects the surprise? She mentioned meeting you for coffee. The relief that flooded through me was so intense it was almost painful. This was further confirmation that my husband wasn't cheating. He was just desperately trying to preserve a surprise he had spent months planning. I really am the worst, I groaned, covering my face with my hands. I can't believe I doubted you both. Again. Within 5 minutes. Rachel's laugh was gentle, without judgment. Maybe take that as a sign that you need to talk to him sooner rather than later. That evening, I arrived home before David, my mind still churning with thoughts from my conversation with Rachel. Our apartment felt different somehow. The familiar spaces now charged with the awareness of how close I had come to suspecting something terrible in a place built on love and commitment. I changed out of my work clothes and began preparing dinner, hoping the routine task might help organize my thoughts. How could I address the disconnection I'd been feeling without revealing my embarrassing leap to infidelity? And should I even pretend to be surprised at the anniversary celebration now that I knew about it? The sound of David's key in the lock interrupted my contemplation. He entered the apartment with an armful of files and his laptop bag, looking exhausted but brightening when he saw me at the stove. "You're home early," he observed, setting down his things to kiss my cheek. "I thought you had a shift until 8. I swapped with Melissa," I lied, unable to admit I had called in sick to investigate my unfounded suspicions. "Thought it would be nice to have dinner together for once." David's smile was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way that had first attracted me to him 6 years ago. "That sounds perfect. Let me just shower off the day." As he disappeared into the bathroom, I found myself studying the living room for any clues I might have missed, any evidence that would contradict Rachel's explanation. But all I saw were the familiar trappings of our life together. Photos from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, the mismatched bookshelf with my medical references alongside his financial journals, the throw blanket his mother had knitted for our first Christmas as a married couple. This was not the home of a man leading a double life. It was simply the home of two people who had gradually drifted into parallel existences rather than a shared one. Over dinner, a simple pasta dish that had been our go-to meal during the early days of dating, I found myself searching David's expressions for signs of deception, but all I saw was fatigue and something else. Excitement? Nervousness? Probably related to the anniversary surprise he believed was still secret. "Rachel mentioned seeing you recently," I ventured, immediately regretting the clumsy approach. David's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Oh? When did you talk to Rachel?" "We had coffee this afternoon," I replied, watching him carefully. "She said you've been helping her with some financial planning." It wasn't exactly what Rachel had said, but it wasn't entirely untrue either. He had been helping plan something, just not her finances. David recovered quickly, nodding as he returned to his pasta. "Yeah, she had some questions about investments. Nothing major." The ease with which he maintained the cover story bothered me. Even for an innocent surprise, the lie came too naturally to his lips. How many other small deceptions had peppered our conversations over the years? How many had I told him in return? "David," I began, setting down my fork. "Are you happy? With us, I mean." The question clearly caught him off guard. He set down his own fork, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" "We hardly see each other anymore," I said, finally voicing what had been bothering me for months. "Between my shifts and your late nights, we're like roommates passing in the hallway. I can't remember the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about bills or schedules." David's face softened. "I know it's been tough lately. My workload has been intense, and your rotation schedule doesn't help. But it's just a phase, Em. It won't be like this forever." "How do we know that?" I pressed. "What if this phase becomes our new normal? Wake up, go to work, come home exhausted, repeat. When do we actually live our life together?" The words tumbled out with more emotion than I had intended, revealing the depth of my concerns. This wasn't just about suspected infidelity anymore. It was about the gradual erosion of the connection that had once seemed unbreakable. David reached across the table for my hand, his eyes sincere. "I've been thinking the same thing, actually. That's why..." He stopped abruptly, catching himself. "That's why I've been considering asking for a position change at the firm, something with more regular hours." I could tell he had nearly revealed the anniversary surprise, pivoting at the last moment to a related but less specific truth. It was endearing and frustrating simultaneously. His desire to preserve the surprise preventing the complete honesty I was seeking. "Really?" I asked, squeezing his hand. "You'd do that? For us?" "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "Nothing is worth losing what matters most." I thought the extra money would help us reach our goals faster, but not at the expense of our relationship. His sincerity was palpable, making me feel even worse about my earlier suspicions. Here was my husband, working extra hours not for selfish reasons or to avoid me, but to create a special moment for us and to build toward our shared future. "I've missed you," I admitted, my throat tightening with emotion. Not just physically missing you being here, but missing us. The way we used to talk and laugh and just be together. David's eyes glistened slightly in the dining room light. "I've missed you too, Em. More than you know." In that moment, the distance that had grown between us seemed to contract slightly, not disappearing entirely, but diminishing enough to offer hope that what had drifted apart could be drawn together again with intention and effort. As we cleared the dinner dishes together, David's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, then quickly pocketed the device, but not before I caught Rachel's name on the notification. The old suspicion flickered briefly before rational thought extinguished it. They were finalizing anniversary plans, nothing more. I had confirmation now, both from Rachel's messages and from the genuine love I could see in my husband's eyes. Yet something still nagged at me, not about fidelity, but about honesty. Our marriage had accumulated too many small secrets, too many omissions and half-truths. Even with innocent intentions, these patterns of concealment had created the space for doubt to flourish. As we settled on the couch to watch a show, our first relaxed evening together in weeks, I made a silent promise to myself. After the anniversary surprise, we would have a real conversation about transparency, about rebuilding the openness that had defined our early relationship. I would confess my unfounded suspicions, not to hurt him, but to clear the air completely and establish a new foundation of absolute honesty. For now, though, I simply leaned against his shoulder, savoring the solid presence of the man I had nearly wronged with my suspicion, grateful for the chance to rebuild what had begun to crack. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo of awareness. Now that I knew about the surprise anniversary celebration, I noticed countless small signs I had previously missed. David's hurried phone calls that ended when I entered the room, the unfamiliar browser history about formal wear and photographers, the way he anxiously checked our shared calendar to ensure I hadn't made plans for our anniversary weekend. I became an actress in my own life, pretending not to notice these clues while simultaneously processing my lingering guilt over suspecting him of infidelity. Each time David made an excuse about working late, when I now knew he was actually meeting with caterers or florists. I nodded understandingly, playing the role of the unsuspecting wife while silently appreciating the effort he was investing in our relationship. Rachel maintained her part in the charade as well, casually mentioning being busy with work projects when we both knew she was assembling centerpieces or coordinating with the photographer David had hired. The conspiracy of love surrounding me was touching, even as I recognized how easily such secretive behavior could be misinterpreted. On Friday evening, 2 days before our actual anniversary, I returned from my shift to find a handwritten note on our bed alongside a garment bag. "Emma, pack an overnight bag and put on what's in this garment bag. A car will pick you up at 7 p.m. The celebration begins tonight. All my love, David." Inside the garment bag was a stunning emerald green dress I had admired in a boutique window months ago, but had considered too expensive to justify. The gesture brought tears to my eyes, not just for the beautiful dress, but for the realization that even when I thought David wasn't paying attention, he had been noticing and remembering the small details of my desires. At precisely 7 p.m., a sleek black car arrived outside our apartment building. The driver handed me an envelope containing a single card with David's handwriting. "5 years ago, you made me the happiest man alive. Tonight is just the beginning of my thank you." First stop, where it all began. I smiled, immediately understanding the reference. The car was taking me to Riverside Park, where David had asked me out on our first official date 6 years earlier. It seemed the anniversary surprise wasn't just a vow renewal ceremony, but an elaborate treasure hunt through the significant landmarks of our relationship. At the park, I found David waiting by the same bench where we had sat talking until the maintenance crew had politely informed us the park was closing. He looked devastatingly handsome in a tailored suit, his face lighting up when he saw me in the green dress. "You look beautiful," he said, taking my hands and kissing me softly. "Are you surprised?" I nodded, technically not lying since I hadn't expected this particular aspect of the celebration. The dress, the car, it's all incredible. "I can't believe you remembered this bench." "I remember everything about us," David replied, his voice thick with emotion. "That's what this weekend is about, remembering where we've been and recommitting to where we're going." He presented me with a small velvet box containing delicate emerald earrings that matched the dress perfectly. After I put them on, we walked hand in hand to a nearby restaurant where he had reserved a private dining room. Throughout dinner, David shared memories from our early relationship. Some I remembered vividly, others that had faded with time but came rushing back at his prompting. "I've been so focused on building our future," David admitted over dessert, "that I think I lost sight of nurturing our present. Planning this anniversary reminded me of all the reasons I fell in love with you in the first place." His vulnerability created space for my own. "I've felt the same way," I confessed. "Like we've been living parallel lives instead of a shared one. I've missed you, even when you're right beside me." David reached across the table for my hand. "That changes now. I promise." The sincerity in his eyes made me believe him, even as I recognized that real change would require more than romantic gestures or momentary declarations. It would demand ongoing effort from both of us to maintain the connection that had begun to fray. As we left the restaurant, David directed me to a waiting car. "One more stop tonight," he explained with a mysterious smile. "A preview of tomorrow's main event." The car took us to the Botanical Gardens, closed to the public at this late hour but illuminated by thousands of twinkling lights that transformed the familiar space into something magical. A security guard nodded to David as he led me along a path lined with lanterns toward the Rose Pavilion. When we arrived, I gasped. The pavilion had been decorated with flowing white fabric, more twinkling lights, and arrangements of my favorite flowers. In the center stood a small table with champagne and an album. "This is where we'll renew our vows tomorrow," David explained, surrounded by our closest friends and family. "But tonight, it's just us." He opened the album to reveal photographs from our relationship, everything from grainy cell phone pictures from our first dates to professional wedding photos to casual selfies from vacations and holidays. The final pages were empty except for a handwritten note. "The best is yet to come." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed me. While I had been doubting our connection, David had been painstakingly curating these memories and planning this elaborate celebration of our love. My earlier suspicions now seemed not just unfounded, but almost sacrilegious given the depth of his devotion. Yet even in this perfect moment, a small voice whispered that the most beautiful gestures couldn't substitute for the daily work of honest communication. The album of memories was wonderful, but the empty pages ahead could only be filled if we both committed to showing up fully in our marriage each day. As if reading my thoughts, David took both my hands in his. "Emma, these past few months of planning made me realize how much I've been taking us for granted. Working late, coming home exhausted, barely talking about anything meaningful. That's not the husband I want to be. We're both guilty of letting our connection slip," I acknowledged. "My shifts, my exhaustion. I haven't been fully present either." David nodded, his expression serious. "Tomorrow is about renewing our vows publicly. But tonight, I want to make some private promises to you. I promise to prioritize us over work. I promise to make time for real conversations, not just logistics. I promise to be honest, even when it's difficult." The mention of honesty made my stomach tighten as I thought of my unfounded suspicions. Perhaps this was the moment to clear the air completely. "I need to tell you something," I began hesitantly. "Something that happened earlier this week." The words hovered between us, my confession poised on the edge of utterance. But as I looked into David's expectant eyes, illuminated by the twinkling lights of the pavilion he had so lovingly prepared, I hesitated. Would revealing my suspicion taint this perfect moment? Would it cast a shadow over tomorrow's celebration? "What is it, Em?" David prompted gently, his thumbs tracing reassuring circles on my hands. I took a deep breath, recalibrating. "I saw your car outside Rachel's house the other night," I admitted. deciding to start with this simple truth rather than immediately confessing my leap to the worst conclusion. David's expression shifted from concern to understanding. "When I was showing her your grandfather's restored watch," he confirmed. "I was so excited about how it turned out, I couldn't wait to share it with someone." "I know that now," I said, squeezing his hands. "But in the moment, seeing your car there so late when you told me you were working, it made me wonder what was really happening." I watched his face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction to this partial confession. Would he connect the dots to the larger implication? David was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly as he processed my words. "You thought I was lying about where I was," he stated rather than asked. "Which made you question what else I might be lying about?" I nodded, relieved that he was meeting me halfway in this difficult conversation. It made me realize how easily doubt can creep in when communication breaks down. We've been living such separate lives lately. It's created space for misunderstandings. David's eyes searched mine, and I could see the moment he fully understood what I wasn't explicitly saying. "Emma," he said slowly, "did you think something was happening between me and Rachel?" The direct question left no room for evasion. "The thought crossed my mind," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just for a moment. I saw you embracing in her doorway, and my tired mind jumped to conclusions. I'm so ashamed of even considering it. I expected hurt, perhaps even anger. Instead, David's expression reflected a complex mixture of sadness and understanding. I've been sneaking around, making secret plans, having private conversations with your best friend, coming home late with terrible explanations," he acknowledged. "Looking at it from your perspective, I can see why your mind went there, especially when we've been so disconnected lately." His generosity in receiving my confession without defensiveness made my eyes fill with tears. "I should have trusted you more," I insisted. "The fact that I could even think that even for a moment, it says more about the state of our communication than about your trust in me," David countered, wiping away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. "We've both been missing from this marriage lately, Emma. Physically present sometimes, but emotionally checked out. That's the real issue we need to address." His insight struck me as profoundly true. My suspicion had been a symptom of our growing emotional distance, not the disease itself. "I confronted Rachel about it," I continued, deciding that complete honesty was the only way forward. "That's what our coffee meeting was really about. She showed me your text messages about the anniversary plans, and I felt like the worst wife and friend imaginable." David actually chuckled softly at this. "So you've known about the surprise all week?" And here I thought I was being so stealthy with my final preparations. His ability to find humor in the situation eased the remaining tension between us. "You were very stealthy," I assured him with a small smile. "I only figured it out because I turned into an amateur detective for all the wrong reasons." David pulled me closer, wrapping his arms around my waist. "I'm glad you told me, even if the timing isn't what you planned. No more secrets between us, Emma. Not even well-intentioned ones. That's my most important vow for tomorrow." "No more secrets," I agreed, resting my forehead against his. "And no more parallel lives. We find our way back to a shared journey, even when our schedules and responsibilities try to pull us apart." As we sealed this private promise with a kiss, I felt something shift between us. A return to the foundation of honesty and vulnerability that had characterized our relationship before careers and routines had begun to erode it. The anniversary celebration David had planned was beautiful, but this moment of raw truth felt like the true renewal of our commitment to each other. Later that night, as we lay together in the luxury hotel room David had booked as part of his surprise, I found myself reflecting on how quickly life can change course. Just days ago, I had sat in my car in the rain, watching my husband embrace my best friend and assuming the worst. Now, I understood that moment as part of a beautiful conspiracy of love, rather than the betrayal I had feared. "What are you thinking about?" David murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "How different things could have been if I had confronted you that night instead of waiting and talking to Rachel first," I admitted. "One impulsive action based on a misunderstanding could have damaged everything." David was quiet for a moment before responding. "Maybe that's the lesson in all this. To pause before reacting. To seek understanding before judgment. To remember that what we see isn't always the full picture." His wisdom resonated deeply. In the medical emergencies I faced at work, I was trained to quickly assess and respond to symptoms. But in relationships, rushing to conclusions based on partial evidence could be disastrous. "Tomorrow, when we renew our vows," I said softly, I'm adding a private promise to always seek the full truth before jumping to conclusions. David kissed my forehead gently. And I promise to live in such a way that the truth is never something you need to fear. As sleep began to claim us both, I marveled at how what had begun as a moment of suspected betrayal had transformed into an opportunity for deeper honesty and recommitment. The anniversary celebration would be beautiful, certainly, but the real gift had been this chance to confront the cracks in our foundation before they could threaten the entire structure of our marriage. Tomorrow we would stand before friends and family to renew our formal vows. But tonight, in the quiet honesty of each other's arms, we had already begun the more important work of renewing our commitment to the daily practice of love, not just in grand gestures and celebrations, but in the mundane moments of truth and presence that ultimately determine a marriage's resilience. The morning of our vow renewal ceremony dawned with perfect clarity, as if the universe itself approved of our recommitment. Sunlight streamed through the hotel room curtains as I awoke to find David already dressed in casual clothes, arranging breakfast on the small table by the window. "Good morning, almost renewed wife," he greeted me with a smile. "We have until noon before the official preparations begin. Rachel is handling the final setup at the gardens." The mention of Rachel brought a flush of renewed embarrassment, but it faded quickly. Last night's conversation had cleared the air between David and me. Soon I would have the opportunity to do the same with my best friend. After a leisurely breakfast, we took a walk through the city park, hand in hand like the newlyweds we had once been. The conversation flowed easily between us, not just about the day ahead, but about deeper topics we had neglected in our busy lives. His growing dissatisfaction with the cutthroat culture at his firm, my thoughts about eventually transitioning from emergency medicine to a family practice with more regular hours, our shared desire to start trying for a baby in the coming year. Why haven't we talked about these things before? I wondered aloud as we paused by a duck pond. These aren't new thoughts for either of us. David considered this, skimming a stone across the water's surface. I think we got caught in the trap of postponing real life. You know, after this project, after this promotion, after we save X amount, then we'll focus on what really matters. But then there's always another milestone ahead, another reason to keep pushing the important conversations into some hypothetical future. His insight resonated deeply. We had been living for a tomorrow that never arrived, sacrificing present connection for future security and accomplishments. No more postponing, I decided, squeezing his hand. Life is happening now, not in some perfect future scenario we've imagined. By the time we returned to the hotel to prepare for the ceremony, I felt more aligned with David than I had in months. The misunderstanding about his presence at Rachel's house had been painful, but it had catalyzed a necessary reset in our relationship, a chance to recognize and correct our drift before it became an unbridgeable distance. In separate rooms, we dressed for the ceremony. David in his new suit, me in a simple white dress we had chosen together years ago for our civil ceremony, but had never worn when we opted for a traditional wedding instead. The symmetry felt right, a nod to both our past and our fresh beginning. When a knock came at my door, I expected the makeup artist David had arranged. Instead, Rachel stood there, looking uncertain until I pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, "for suspecting you, for putting you in such an awkward position." "Stop apologizing," she insisted, pulling back to meet my eyes. "David told me you talked last night. That's what matters, that you two are communicating again. Did he tell you everything?" I asked, slightly embarrassed. Rachel nodded. "He thought I deserved to know exactly what happened, given my inadvertent role in it all. But Emma, I understand, really. If I'd seen what you saw, given the context of how distant you two had become, still, you're my best friend. I should have known better. Friendships get tested too," Rachel said wisely. "The strong ones bounce back. Now let me help you with your hair before the professional arrives. I've been envisioning this updo for weeks." As Rachel worked on my hair, she filled me in on the final details of the celebration. The 30 guests who would be arriving shortly, the string quartet David had hired as a surprise within the surprise, the photographer who would capture it all. Her excitement was contagious, and I found myself genuinely looking forward to the ceremony despite already knowing about it. "David wanted today to remind you of how many people love you both," Rachel explained as she pinned another strand into place. "He said somewhere along the way, your lives had become too isolated, just work and home, without the community that had once been so important to you." She was right. We had gradually withdrawn from our social circles as our careers intensified, declining invitations and missing gatherings until they eventually stopped coming. Today would be a reintroduction not just to each other, but to the extended network of relationships that enriched our lives. When Rachel finished my hair and the makeup artist had completed her work, I hardly recognized the woman in the mirror, not because of the professional styling, but because of the genuine joy radiating from within. The shadows of doubt and disconnection that had clouded my expression for months had lifted, replaced by a clarity of purpose and a renewed appreciation for the life David and I had built together. "Ready?" Rachel asked, checking her watch. "It's almost time." As I nodded, another knock came at the door. Rachel opened it to reveal my parents, who had flown in from Arizona for the surprise ceremony. Their presence, another detail David had arranged without my knowledge, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Don't cry yet," my mother admonished gently, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. "Save some emotion for the ceremony. Your father can barely hold it together as it is." Dad pretended to be offended by this characterization, but the moisture in his eyes confirmed my mother's assessment. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "just like at your first wedding. Maybe even happier." "I am happier," I realized aloud, "because now I know what it takes to make a marriage work. It's not just love, it's attention and intention and choosing each other every day." My father nodded approvingly. "Now that's wisdom worth renewing vows over." With my parents on either side and Rachel leading the way, I left the hotel room and headed toward the gardens where David and our guests awaited. The path ahead was clear, not just for today's ceremony, but for the marriage we were consciously recommitting to. One built on honesty, presence, and the understanding that love is not just a feeling, but a daily practice of seeing and choosing each other through misunderstandings, busy seasons, and the countless small moments that ultimately compose a life together. The Botanical Garden Pavilion had been transformed since my preview with David the night before. Now filled with our closest friends and family, the space radiated warmth and celebration. White chairs adorned with simple greenery lined a center aisle that led to an arch woven with eucalyptus and white roses. Soft classical music from the string quartet filled the air, momentarily pausing as my parents and I appeared at the entrance. David stood beneath the arch, his back to me until the music shifted to signal my arrival. When he turned, the naked emotion on his face nearly undid my composure. This wasn't the polite societal happiness expected at such events. It was raw, genuine joy mingled with profound relief, as if he too had recognized how close we had come to losing our way. My father squeezed my hand before placing it in David's, a symbolic gesture we had included in our first wedding and chosen to repeat today. As our fingers intertwined, I felt the familiar callus on David's thumb, a small imperfection I had always loved, a tangible reminder of his humanity amid the sometimes perfect image he presented to the world. "Hi," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Hi," I whispered back, suddenly shy despite our 12 years together. Our officiant, David's Uncle Robert, who had married us the first time, welcomed everyone with warm humor, acknowledging the rarity of a couple choosing to renew their vows after just 5 years. "Most people wait for milestone anniversaries," he noted with a smile. "But David and Emma have never done things conventionally. They understand that renewing commitment isn't about the passage of time, but about the depth of intention. Sometimes the most important promises are those we make after learning just how challenging they can be to keep." His words resonated deeply with our recent experience. This renewal wasn't just a celebration of time served, but a conscious recommendation after recognizing how easily connection can erode when not actively maintained. When the moment came to share our vows, David spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Emma, 5 years ago, I promised to love and cherish you for all our days. What I didn't fully understand then was how easy it is to love someone, but how challenging it can be to truly cherish them, to treat each moment together as precious, to prioritize connection over convenience, presence over productivity." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I've learned that marriage isn't sustained by grand gestures or milestone celebrations, but by the small daily choices to see each other, to listen without distraction, to share not just space but genuine presence. I recommit to those choices today, to being fully available even when work demands my attention, to creating space for real conversation, to remembering that no professional success means anything without you to share it with." Tears blurred my vision as I absorbed his words, so perfectly articulating the understanding we had reached together. When my turn came, I found myself abandoning most of the vows I had prepared to speak directly from my heart instead. "David, These past months have taught me that trust isn't just about fidelity, but about believing in the goodness of each other's intentions, even when actions are confusing or hurtful. It's about seeking understanding before judgment, extending grace when miscommunication happens, and remembering the full history of our love when present circumstances feel disconnected. I tightened my grip on his hands, anchoring myself in his steady presence. I vow to prioritize our relationship even during the busiest seasons, to create space for joy and rest amid our ambitions, and to remember that the life we're building is meant to be experienced together, not just constructed for some future moment of arrival. As we exchanged rings, simple bands engraved with our original wedding date alongside today's date, I was struck by the symbolism of the circular objects. Our relationship had come full circle in many ways, returning to foundational truths about connection and presence that we had somehow lost sight of along the way. Uncle Robert pronounced us still and renewed husband and wife, a phrasing that drew appreciative laughter from our guests before David pulled me into a kiss that felt both familiar and thrillingly new, a perfect embodiment of the relationship we were recommitting to. The celebration that followed held all the traditional elements: a beautiful meal, heartfelt toasts, our first dance to the same song we had chosen at our wedding. Yet everything felt infused with deeper meaning now, colored by our recent journey from disconnection back to each other. During a quiet moment while David was speaking with his parents, Rachel appeared at my side with 2 champagne flutes. "To friendship that survives misunderstanding," she proposed quietly, clinking her glass against mine. "And to best friends who plan incredible vow renewals while being falsely suspected of affair having," I added with a self-deprecating smile. Rachel laughed. The awkwardness between us finally dissolved completely. "I've been thinking about it, and in a weird way, I'm almost grateful for the misunderstanding," she admitted. "It forced you and David to have conversations you might have postponed indefinitely otherwise." Her insight struck me as profoundly true. Without that rainy night and my mistaken conclusion, we might have continued drifting apart, maintaining the appearance of a happy marriage while the substance of our connection continued to erode. "Sometimes we need a shock to see what's really happening," I agreed. "Or in this case, what isn't happening." "Just promise me one thing," Rachel said, her expression turning serious. "Next time you suspect me of sleeping with your husband, maybe just ask me directly?" I nearly choked on my champagne at her bluntness, drawing curious glances from nearby guests. "Deal," I agreed once I'd recovered, though I'm hoping there won't be a next time for that particular suspicion. "There won't be," Rachel assured me with confidence. "Look at him." I followed her gaze to find David watching me from across the room, his expression so full of love and contentment that it nearly took my breath away. When our eyes met, his smile deepened, creating the crinkles around his eyes that had first attracted me to him all those years ago. "You two found your way back," Rachel said softly. "That's worth celebrating even more than the anniversary itself." She was right. Today wasn't just marking the passage of time. It was commemorating the conscious choice to return to each other, to rebuild what had begun to crumble, to recommend to the daily practice of love even after glimpsing how easily it could be lost. As the celebration continued around us, I made my way to David's side, slipping my hand into his with a newfound appreciation for this simple act of connection. The road ahead would still hold challenges, demanding careers, potential parenthood, the inevitable complications of 2 complex humans sharing a life. But we had rediscovered the foundation that would allow us to face those challenges together. Honest communication, intentional presence, and the courage to see each other truly, even when the truth was difficult to acknowledge. "Happy?" David asked quietly, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on my hand. "Beyond happy," I replied. "Grateful. For you, for us, for second chances and new beginnings, and for parked cars that lead to important conversations," he suggested with a knowing smile. I laughed softly, leaning into his embrace. "Even for those, especially for those." 6 months after our vow renewal, life had settled into a new rhythm. Not the frantic parallel existence we had been living before, but something more intentional and connected. David had transitioned to a different position within his firm that required less travel and fewer late nights. I had adjusted my schedule at the hospital to include more day shifts, creating more overlapping time in our lives. The changes weren't just logistical. We had maintained our commitment to genuine communication, instituting a phones-away dinner policy and regular weekend mornings dedicated to conversation, rather than chores or work. The small rituals of connection we had once taken for granted, morning coffee together, goodnight kisses that weren't merely perfunctory, actual conversations about our days, had been consciously restored to our relationship. On a crisp Saturday morning in early spring, I sat on our apartment balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city come alive below. David was inside preparing breakfast, another small change in our routine, taking turns caring for each other in tangible ways rather than each fending for ourselves in the rush of daily life. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Lunch next week? Tuesday or Thursday work for you?" I smiled, appreciating how our friendship had not just survived but strengthened after the misunderstanding. Our weekly lunches had become another anchor in my life, a space to process everything from work challenges to marriage insights to Rachel's adventures in online dating. As I replied, suggesting Thursday, David joined me on the balcony with 2 plates of Eggs Benedict, my favorite weekend breakfast that he had finally mastered after numerous failed attempts. "Texting Rachel?" he asked, setting the plates on our small outdoor table. "Yes, planning lunch next week," I confirmed. "How did you know?" David smiled. "You get a particular look when you're texting her, kind of amused and fond at the same time." The observation touched me. This evidence that he was paying attention to small details, noticing patterns in my expressions and behaviors. This was the kind of presence we had both been missing during our busy, disconnected period. "I've been thinking," David said as we began eating. "Remember how we talked about starting a family soon? Maybe it's time to move that from theoretical future plans to actual present decisions." The suggestion made my heart skip. We had discussed having children throughout our relationship, always with the caveat of when the time is right. Somehow, that perfect moment had remained perpetually in the future, pushed back by career advancements, financial goals, and the general busyness of our lives. "Really?" I asked, searching his face for signs of hesitation. "You feel ready?" David nodded, his expression thoughtful but certain. "The past 6 months have shown me what really matters. I don't want to postpone the life we've always said we wanted anymore. And honestly, after fixing what was broken between us, I feel like we could handle anything together, even 3 a.m. feedings and diaper disasters." His confidence made me smile. "It would mean changes for both our careers," I pointed out, thinking practically even as excitement built within me. "Especially mine, with the overnight shifts and exposure to various illnesses." "We'd figure it out," David said simply. "Maybe it's time for that family practice you've mentioned wanting to join eventually. Or maybe we adjust in other ways. The point is, we'd approach it as a team, not as 2 individuals trying to balance competing priorities." The contrast with our previous life struck me forcefully, how we had operated as separate entities even while sharing a home and a marriage, each pursuing individual goals without fully considering their impact on our shared life. "I think you're right," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. "It's time to stop postponing the future we've always wanted." David's smile widened, joy and anticipation illuminating his features. "Really? You're ready to try?" I nodded, suddenly certain. The timing will never be perfect. There will always be career considerations and financial calculations and 1,000 reasons to wait. But we've learned the hard way that life happens in the messy present, not in some idealized future. As David leaned across the table to kiss me, I marveled at how completely our perspective had shifted. 6 months ago, I had sat in my car in the rain, watching my husband at my best friend's door and assuming the worst about both of them. That painful misunderstanding had initiated a process of rebuilding that now allowed us to face the future with confidence rather than trepidation. Later that day, as we walked hand in hand through our neighborhood farmers market, another small ritual we had reclaimed in our recommitted life together, I found myself studying the young families around us with new interest. Toddlers pointing excitedly at colorful produce, babies sleeping peacefully in carriers, parents navigating the market with the chaotic choreography that child-rearing requires. "Second thoughts?" David asked, noticing my thoughtful observation. "Not at all," I assured him. "Just imagining our future. Our real future, not some distant hypothetical one." He squeezed my hand. "It won't always be Instagram perfect," he warned with a smile, nodding toward a nearby father dealing with a toddler tantrum while balancing a precarious tower of produce. "Good," I replied firmly. "I've had enough of perfect appearances covering disconnected realities. I'll take messy and real over polished and empty any day." That evening, as we prepared dinner together in comfortable synchronicity, my phone buzzed with a text notification. I glanced at it to see Rachel's name above a message that made me laugh out loud. "What's so funny?" David asked, looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "Rachel," I explained, still smiling. She's asking if we're free for dinner next month with her new boyfriend. Apparently, it's getting serious enough for the best friend approval stage. We should definitely do that, David agreed. After all she did for our vow renewal, we owe her at least one awkward double date with a potential future husband. The casual domestic moment, chopping vegetables while planning social engagements with friends, might have seemed mundane to an outside observer. But to me, it represented everything we had nearly lost and consciously reclaimed. The comfortable intimacy of shared daily life, the integration of individual relationships into our marriage, the ability to plan a future together with confidence rather than uncertainty. As I moved to wrap my arms around David from behind, resting my cheek against his back while he continued preparing our meal, I silently thanked that rainy night and parked car for the wake-up call that had ultimately saved us, not from infidelity as I had feared, but from the slower, more insidious threat of disconnection that might have eventually eroded everything we had built together. The journey from suspicion to renewal had been painful at times, but it had led us here. To this kitchen, this evening, this life we were fully present in rather than merely passing through. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. 1 year to the day after I had sat in my car watching David at Rachel's door, we found ourselves gathering with friends and family for another celebration, this one marking an anticipated arrival rather than an anniversary. The baby shower, hosted by Rachel in her backyard, represented the culmination of the journey we had begun that rainy night. I sat in a decorated chair at the center of attention, my hand resting on the prominent curve of my 7 months pregnant belly, watching David chat animatedly with my father about the nursery renovation he had completed the previous weekend. The ease between them, between all our assembled loved ones, filled me with a contentment I had once feared might be permanently beyond our reach. Rachel approached with a glass of sparkling cider, settling beside me on the cushioned bench. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her eyes reflecting genuine care. "Physically, like I'm carrying a future soccer player," I admitted with a laugh as the baby delivered a particularly enthusiastic kick. "Emotionally, better than I ever imagined possible." Rachel smiled, her gaze drifting to David across the yard. "You know, a year ago today was when everything almost fell apart. Do you ever think about that?" The observation startled me. I hadn't been tracking the date with the same precision she apparently had. "You remember the exact day?" "Of course I do," Rachel replied. "It was the day you thought your husband and best friend were having an affair. That's not something you forget easily, even when you're the falsely accused party." Her wry tone made me laugh despite the seriousness of the memory. "I'm still embarrassed about that," I admitted, but also grateful in a strange way. That misunderstanding forced us to confront what was really happening in our marriage. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes it takes a shock to see the truth. Not the truth you thought you saw that night, but the actual truth, that you and David had stopped really seeing each other. And now we can't stop seeing each other," I said softly, my gaze finding David across the yard. As if sensing my attention, he looked up, his face illuminating with a smile that still made my heart skip after all these years. He excused himself from his conversation with my father and made his way to where Rachel and I sat, kneeling in front of me to place his hands on my belly. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, his voice tender. "Your daughter is practicing her martial arts," I informed him, guiding his hand to where the baby was most active. "And your wife is getting nostalgic with Rachel about the night that changed everything." David's expression grew thoughtful as he registered the significance of the date. 1 year ago today, he mused, from crisis to clarity. From misunderstanding to miracle," Rachel added, gesturing toward my pregnant belly with her glass before tactfully excusing herself to check on other guests. Alone for a moment in the midst of the celebration, David took Rachel's place beside me on the bench, his arms sliding naturally around my shoulders. "If I could go back to that night," he said quietly, "I'd tell myself to drive straight home from Rachel's instead of letting you see me there and jump to conclusions." I shook my head. "If you had, we might have continued drifting apart without ever recognizing it was happening. That misunderstanding was painful but necessary." "Like labor?" David suggested with a small smile, his hand returning to my belly. "Exactly like labor," I agreed. "Difficult and painful, but bringing something beautiful into existence." As our friends and family continued the celebration around us, I leaned against David's solid presence, reflecting on the journey that had led us here. From disconnected partners leading parallel lives to a truly united couple preparing to welcome our daughter. From a wife sitting alone in a car, suspecting betrayal, to a mother-to-be surrounded by love and support. From a marriage maintained by habit to one consciously chosen and continually renewed through daily acts of presence and truth, the baby kicked again, as if emphasizing the moment. David laughed softly, whispering to my belly, "We hear you, little one. You're part of this story too." And she was. Our daughter, conceived in the renewed love that had emerged from that difficult period of reconnection. She represented not just our biological continuation, but the tangible manifestation of our recommitment to building a life that prioritized connection over convenience, honesty over harmony, and the messy, beautiful present over some hypothetical perfect future. As David helped me to my feet so we could rejoin our guests, I caught Rachel's eye across the yard. She raised her glass in a subtle toast that needed no words, an acknowledgement of how far we had all come from that rainy night and the misunderstanding that could have destroyed both my marriage and our friendship. I returned the gesture with a smile of profound gratitude. The path from suspicion to celebration had been unexpected and at times painful, but it had led us exactly where we needed to be, fully present in our imperfect, wonderful reality. Finally understanding that love is not just a feeling, but a daily choice to see and be seen, to know and be known, through all the misunderstandings and revelations that ultimately compose a life shared authentically with others. 5 years after the night I saw David's car at Rachel's house, life had evolved in ways both expected and surprising. Our daughter Charlotte, now an energetic 4-year-old with David's thoughtful eyes and my stubborn determination, had been joined by her 2-year-old brother James, completing our family in ways that felt both chaotic and perfect. The professional transitions we had begun during my first pregnancy had continued to unfold. David had eventually left investment banking altogether, leveraging his financial expertise to join a nonprofit focused on economic empowerment for underserved communities. The pay cut had been substantial, but the regular hours and meaningful work had transformed him, bringing a contentment I had never seen during his high-pressure corporate days. My own career had shifted as well. After returning from maternity leave with Charlotte, I had reduced my emergency room hours and joined a family practice 3 days a week, creating a more sustainable balance between professional fulfillment and family life. The medical challenges were different but no less engaging, and the relationships I built with patients over time brought a satisfaction that the adrenaline of emergency medicine had never provided. Rachel remained a constant in our lives, though her role had evolved as well. 2 years earlier, she had married Kevin, the boyfriend she had nervously introduced to us for approval. They now lived 3 blocks away and were expecting their first child, with David and me serving as godparents in waiting, a full-circle moment that never failed to make me smile when I considered how our lives remained intertwined, despite the misunderstanding that had nearly severed our connection. On a warm Saturday morning, David and I sat on our expanded balcony, part of the renovation we had completed after James was born, watching the children play in the small container garden we had established. Charlotte was earnestly explaining to her brother the importance of gentle watering for the tomato seedlings, her little face serious with responsibility. "She gets that teacher voice from you," David observed, sipping his coffee with an amused expression. "And the inability to sit still for more than 30 seconds from you," I countered, watching as Charlotte abandoned her horticultural lesson mid-sentence to investigate a butterfly that had landed nearby. These peaceful weekend mornings had become sacred in our family routine, a time to connect before the day's activities began in earnest. Even as our lives had grown more complex with children and evolving careers, we had maintained our commitment to creating space for genuine presence with each other. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" I asked, my thoughts drifting to the anniversary of that pivotal night. "If I hadn't driven down Maple Street in the rain? If I hadn't seen your car at Rachel's?" David considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes. But then I look at what we've built since then, and I can't imagine any other path that would have led us here." He was right. The misunderstanding that had initially threatened to destroy our marriage had ultimately been the catalyst for its transformation. Without that moment of crisis, we might have continued our gradual drift into parallel lives, maintaining the appearance of connection, while the substance of our relationship eroded beneath the surface. "It's strange to be grateful for one of the worst nights of my life," I admitted. "But I am. Not for the pain or the doubt, but for the wake-up call it provided." "Like Charlotte's fire alarm phase," David suggested with a smile, referring to our daughter's brief but memorable obsession with pulling the fire alarm at preschool. Disruptive and temporarily awful, but effective at getting everyone's attention. I laughed at the comparison, appreciating his ability to find humor in even our most difficult moments. This, too, had been a growth edge in our relationship, learning to hold our challenges lightly when appropriate, to find joy and laughter amid the inevitable complications of a life shared authentically. As the children abandoned the garden entirely to chase each other around the small balcony space, their giggles filling the morning air, David reached for my hand, a simple gesture of connection we never took for granted anymore. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" he asked, his voice soft beneath the children's laughter. "What's that?" "That we didn't settle for a good enough marriage," he said. "That we were brave enough to face what wasn't working, even when it was painful. That we chose each other again, with our eyes fully open." His words resonated deeply. The vows we had renewed 5 years ago had not been empty ritual, but a genuine recommendation to the daily practice of love. Not love as a passive feeling, but as an active choice to remain present and truthful with each other through all life's misunderstandings and revelations. Charlotte bounded over suddenly, climbing into my lap with grass-stained knees and wild hair. "Mommy, can we go to Aunt Rachel's today? She promised to show me the baby's room." "We'll call her after breakfast," I promised, catching David's eye over our daughter's head. The knowing look we shared contained volumes. Gratitude for the friendship that had survived suspicion, appreciation for the family we had created, and recognition of how completely our lives had been transformed by choosing truth over assumption, presence over convenience, and the messy beauty of authentic connection over the safety of comfortable distance. As Charlotte raced off to inform her brother of the potential visit to Aunt Rachel's, David leaned over to kiss me softly, a casual display of affection that was anything but casual in its intention and meaning. "From crisis to clarity to Charlotte and James," he murmured against my lips. "Best wrong turn I never knew you took." I smiled, resting my forehead against his for a moment of connection amid the beautiful chaos of our Saturday morning. Best mistaken conclusion I ever jumped to. And it was. The night I saw his car parked outside my best friend's house had been the beginning of a journey neither of us could have anticipated. One that had led us not just to a stronger marriage or a growing family, but to a deeper understanding of what it truly means to see and be seen, to love and be loved, through all life's misunderstandings and revelations. What a journey we've taken today, from that rainy night of suspicion to the beautiful family that Emma and David built together. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most challenging moments in our relationships can become catalysts for growth and deeper connection. Have you ever experienced a misunderstanding that ultimately led to something positive? Or perhaps you felt that disconnection that can subtly grow between partners when life gets busy? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more explorations of relationships, healing, and personal growth. Each week, we delve into the complexities of human connection and the surprising ways we find our path forward, even through difficult circumstances. Next week, we'll be sharing another emotional journey about forgiveness and second chances that I believe will touch your heart just as deeply. Don't forget to like this video and hit that notification bell so you never miss our new uploads. Your engagement helps our community grow and allows us to continue bringing these meaningful narratives to life. Thank you for joining me today. Remember, sometimes what appears to be a moment of betrayal can actually be the beginning of a profound transformation if we're brave enough to seek the truth and commit to genuine connection. Until next time.